Hello, BookTube. Welcome to another nonfiction review. As I was preparing this material, I was reminded of my childhood, and there was a way I used to entertain myself by gathering all my toy animals, and we're talking a considerable number. And I would gather them together at the doorway of my bedroom, and then I would take them on a step-by-step journey through the house. Those treks could take hours, days, many stopping points along the way, and adventures to be had. I honestly don't recall how or if a final destination was ever reached. When it comes to nonfiction reading, I sometimes find one book on a topic is enough, that I'm happy just to have a light conversational understanding of a subject. But with books like the one we're going to look at today, I really feel like I've just taken one step in a longer journey, or the beginning of a construction project, as you like to explain the photograph, right? Maybe a lifelong one. The book we're going to look at today is The Will to Change: Men, Masculinity, and Love by Bell Hooks, published in 2004 in New York by Atria Books. So we'll go straight to the first question. Could I summarize this book? I think the best person to summarize this book is Bell Hooks. I'm going to read two quotations. This one is from the opening chapter on page 12 of the Kindle edition. I write about men and love as a declaration of profound gratitude to the males in my life with whom I do the work of love. Much of my thinking about maleness began in childhood when I witnessed the difference in the ways my brother and I were treated. The standards used to judge his behavior were much harsher. No male successfully measures up to patriarchal standards without engaging in an ongoing practice of self-betrayal. And this quote is from further on. It's from page 153. Learning to wear a mask. That word is already embedded in the term masculinity. It's the first lesson in patriarchal masculinity that a boy learns. He learns that his core feelings cannot be expressed if they do not conform to the acceptable behaviors sexism defines as male. Asked to give up his true self in order to realize the patriarchal ideal, boys learn self-betrayal early and are rewarded for these acts of soul murder. Contemporary feminist movement created a socially sanctioned space where girls can create a sense of self that is distinct from sexist definitions. The same freedom has not been extended to boys. So this book is a feminist work about improving life for men. And I would not blame you if you're having a skeptical reaction at this point in the review when I make that statement. I have to be scrupulously honest and admit that my reaction is kind of the same. Here's a quote that I wrote in my Kindle notebook in reaction to those passages that I just read. I wrote, until I read Hooks, I never perceived feminism as having any interest in men. I perceived feminism as sort of pityingly tolerant of men at best, fearfully castigating them at worst. I perceived feminism as the social movement which guided women to make better lives for themselves, breaking free of gender conformity. But men kind of were left to sort out their own movement. And Hooks does mention how many women and men are uncomfortable with this term feminism or feminist. And I admit that I'm one of those uncomfortable people. I'm uncomfortable not because I want to go back to pre-feminist gender roles for women, because I absolutely do not. And I'm extremely grateful for the social changes that came with the first and second waves of feminism. But I began to feel different about feminism after the 1970s. I began to feel uneasy, alienated by this perception, rightly or wrongly. Maybe I was listening to the wrong media, but the perception was that feminist thought feared men and it preferred to segregate or marginalize them. And if you would describe yourself as feeling kind of the same, well, I would say that Bell Hooks does seem to do her feminism differently. And this book is an explanation of her vision. We'll go to question 2 and talk about what we know about the author. Her real name is Gloria Jean Watkins, and she was born in 1952 in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Like most writers, she had an early fascination with books, and she was greatly influenced by her maternal great-grandmother, Belle Blair Hooks. so much so that she went on to adopt that name. She studied at Stanford University, graduating in 1973. She achieved her master's degree in 1976 and her PhD in 1983. Her writing career broke new ground. Hooks documented issues of race that were not being talked about by white feminist writers and gender issues that were not being addressed by black male writers. Along with Kimberly Cranshaw, Hooks contributed to the understanding of intersectionality, how society operates with multiple power constructs which must be recognized and dismantled in order to truly change inequalities. Hooks wrote over 40 books and articles and became a recognized public intellectual. In 1995, Utne Reader recognized her among its 100 visionaries who can change your life, and Time magazine included her in their 2020 list of 100 Women of the Year. After teaching at a number of universities, Hooks returned to her home state to become Distinguished Professor in Residence in Appalachian Studies at Berea College. She died in December 2021. Question 3, how is this book structured? Well, the Kindle version is 188 pages. The Will to Change has collections of chapters. It has chapters which discuss how cultural concepts of masculinity are communicated to boys through parental example, through the media, and through work practices. And it talks about how both men and women enforce conformity to those concepts. It also has chapters which posit that myths have developed around the idea that males are predisposed to violence or sexual objectification. And it suggests that instead, these antisocial behaviors are symptoms of the emotional damage which conformity to these cultural concepts of masculinity can cause, depending upon how strictly an individual man conforms or is pressured to conform. Interspersed through all these chapters, there is hope for change, and Hooks devotes a lot of paper space to quoting male writers who are trying to reach out to other men and urge them to begin a personal journey whereby they start to distinguish between what society expects from them, what other men and women expect, and what they themselves honestly want. The writing style is conversational, there's perceptible warmth, and it's easy to understand. One note of caution. Now and again, I think Hooks gets carried away with her hope, and she writes with a kind of evangelical excitement, a blanket idealism. And I'll quote an example, this sentence from page 123. A genuine feminist politics always brings us from bondage to freedom, from lovelessness to loving. These sort of statements make me a little uneasy, okay? Probably because I came from an evangelical Christian background, which I escaped. So, that's why this book will be just one stopping point on my personal learning journey about this subject. Question 4, why did I choose to read this book? Well, to keep it brief, I chose this book because of the Barbie movie. I'm going to leave it at that, okay? But expect a sideline video to follow this one in a few days' time, where I will talk more about the film and why it pushed me in the direction of bell hooks. Question 5, we'll go straight to that, shall we? How did I get this book and how much did it cost? I paid £8.45, that's $10.73 US, for the Kindle copy. The cheapest paperback version on Amazon was £9.99, and I could not find better prices than that on eBay. I imagine most of the secondhand copies are set text purchased by students for university courses, and so the need to recoup all the expense of buying those books new, I can see why that's probably keeping secondhand prices higher. Question 6, have I encountered anything unexpected or interesting about this book? What I encountered mainly was relief. It was a relief to read a feminist work which wanted to hear male voices and wanted those voices to talk about what life is actually like for a man, how from the time they're very young, they are directed by all these social cues, which can sometimes just be a look, mass media presentations, and parental example. And from all that, they have to basically reject most of their emotions and any impulses toward free expression just to qualify as men in order to earn and maintain the respect of other men and also the respect of some women. And this process is damaging. Bell Hooks recognizes it as a form of abuse. The Will to Change makes a very convincing case that links this psychological damage to the violent and predatory behavior that we've come to think of as natural for men. It acknowledges that male violence, yes, it's frightening, but suggests that it doesn't need to be inevitable. 25 male writers contributed their thoughts to this book. They represent a range of occupations. I'll just list some of them: editor, psychologist, politician, teacher, ex-soldier, actor, priest, sociologist, couples counselor, professor of journalism, and a physician. These are men who are advocating for new ways that men can be men. They are looking for alternatives to the MRA, men's rights advocacy, and other conservative men's movements, which seem to be just retrenching defensively into the old models of masculinity rather than questioning those models. The men quoted by Hooks are calling out those old models. They're saying those are psychologically harmful to men. And they're also asking women to recognize the ways in which they participate in perpetuating that psychological harm. Question 7. Is there anything readers should be prepared for if they're going to read this book? If you have a tough time with the terms patriarchy or feminism or any of their variations, if those words trigger an emotive reaction and they make it tough to feel comfortable when you're reading, I get you. I'm in the same place myself. But rather than divert from the review, I'm going to present my own meditations on that particular topic in a sideline video. The Will to Change does use the P and F words liberally. Okay, and I accept that there is an argument which would say that Hooks really wouldn't have had much choice. Patriarchy is the only term we've invented so far to talk about the social conditioning that we experience that shapes our view of gender. What I noted was that Hooks herself unwittingly did come up with an alternative term, one that I wish would replace patriarchy for reasons that I'll discuss in my next video. Question 8. Is there anything else interesting to know about the book? The Will to Change, it does not reflect the level of interest or the dialogue that Bell Hooks had many years later with non-binary individuals and queer identity. However, the book does contain hints that she was thinking about the broader positive influence that queer expression could have to this issue. How those who identify as non-binary, they can be way showers. They can be examples of how life can be lived when one draws a distinction between life choices, which would be unwilling obedience to gender stereotypes, and life choices which actually originate in personal desire. Question 9. Any suggestions for related or follow-up reading? Well, that's easy. I say make a note of every male writer who contributes to Bell Hooks' book, and then begin a long-term reading project to find and digest their books and articles. Finally, to sum up, if at this point anyone is still feeling unconvinced, maybe a little wary about reading Bell Hooks, I want to say that I still sympathize. I don't believe the book is perfect. Gender identity, it's such a deeply felt part of ourselves. And it's understandable that everyone is going to be so sensitive about how the subject is approached, who gets to speak, and what language is used. And yet, as difficult and fraught as the talking is, I'm really glad that there is talking and not just silence. Thanks very much, everybody, for checking out today's review. Oh, and a special thanks to subscriber number 67, whoever you are. You added yourself to my numbers last night, and I'm very grateful. Look forward to seeing everybody again soon. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.